Go.
All right. So, thank you all for being here. A few ground rules just for everyone's information. I have met everyone, so just in case, and for the video and for the radio, that machine in the middle there is for the radio station, so this is being recorded for radio. Nancy has very kindly offered to put this up. Do the video, we'll have that up on the YouTube channel later. We'll let you know as soon as it is active. So I'm Lou Marcellus, publisher, editor of the Goldendale Sentinel. And this is an editorial board meeting, very unusual one, but then everything's unusual these days. So a few ground rules. Oh, just so you know who else is here. Sheriff Sonder and his wife Fran are here. At the very end is Jacon from Columbia Gorge News, who we've invited and have kindly offered to come up and join us here today. So in a collegial spirit of joint covering of the event. Dave West is timekeeper. And then Claire West, no relation, is with the Sentinel also, and she's going to help me keep track of the questions as we go through them. We have far more questions than we will be able to get to. I'd like to wrap this up within about 2 hours. Not a hard close, but I have a lot of respect for everybody's time. So, and we keep this moving concisely and on track, we should be able to cover everything that we need to pretty well in that time. I will ask you to speak up as clearly and strongly as you can as you observe. We're all 6 feet apart, so the face masks, especially in a public situation, public speaking situation, are kind of more of an obstacle than a help. So we did do this with optimum safety in mind, so we appreciate accommodating a very unusual situation. We're going to start with the 14th Legislative District candidates, Chris and Tracy, and then they are free to stay or go as they choose. We may have a small break there, but otherwise we're going to go straight through. If you need to go up and use the facility, just feel free to go ahead and do that unless you're in the middle of talking. Might ask you to finish talking first. So now, it's not a typical candidates nights. Editorial board meetings are very different. So we're looking for, and by the way, we have questions from the editorial board, from the newspaper, and we have questions from the community, because editorial boards meetings would not normally accept comments from the community, but we're doing that as a public service because this is as close to a candidates night, community candidates night, as we're going to get this time around. So we did accommodate, we will accommodate as many questions from the community as possible. We will identify which ones are from the community and which ones are from the editorial board. Some of the questions may require an answer from the opposing candidate. Cross-questioning is allowed. If you have a question for a candidate, a speaker, you are free to respond to it. Dave is going to keep track of time. We're going to allow 3 minutes for an initial response to a question, 2 minutes for cross-question from the opposing candidate, or candidates, in that case, in position 3 case. And then, what do we say, Dave, after that?
3 minutes for initial reply, 2 minutes for rebuttal, and then 3 and 2.
3 and 2, right.
And I will, to not interrupt the audio, I will raise my hand at 30 seconds. If you don't pay attention to that, I'll wave my hat. If you don't pay attention to that, I'll throw my hat.
How many seconds?
30 seconds before.
All right, any questions before we start? Everybody clear on what we're doing? Okay, so starting with 14th Legislative District, we have the incumbent Representative Chris Corry and Tracy Rushing. And I'd like to just jump right in. So again, with a typical candidates night, we have an opening statement. We're not going to do that. People can go to your websites. We're just going to jump right into the questions. So I'll start with one for Tracy. And this is an editorial board question. Is it accurate to say that your primary reason for joining this race was concern for public health? And if so, does that make you kind of a one-idea candidate?
I would answer the first question, yes. My primary reason for joining this race is for public health. That being said, there are a myriad of other issues that I think the pandemic has identified in our district. I should say magnified in our district, that are underlying pre-existing conditions that have contributed to why our district has actually done such a terrible job with managing this pandemic, why we've had so many sick people. So those issues in particular, I don't think it's possible to separate them from health and pandemic management. Those sort of examples or those sort of issues include things like housing, education, food security, voting rights. All of that is lumped in to how we responded to this pandemic right now. But big picture-wise, yes, health and healthcare at the moment, I think, are the #1 priority. And I think that we can only move forward as a community if we attempt to achieve some sort of unity that fosters a sense of collaboration and compassion for our neighbors. That is really where we're falling short right now. We are playing teams and it's not working. That's why people are dying. That's why we're having to send our own residents out of the district for health care. And that should not be happening right now. Most other districts in our state are not dealing with this in the same way. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a response to that or a question for her?
Yeah, I guess my response would be, I think that for the 14th district has seen a lot of unique challenges when it comes to fighting this pandemic. We have a higher percentage of essential workforce. We have a higher percentage of multifamily living in our district, and a lot of those things come into play. I would disagree with the notion of the fact that we're playing teams. I think that from the outset, when this started, there was a clear sense of unity when it came to stopping the spread, and we came together and supported a lot of things that we knew were going to be tough for us, but we did it in the spirit of not understanding what the pandemic was going to look like for us and the need to get ourselves ready for the response. From there, politics or playing sides or however you want to call it has been largely coming out of Olympia. We've seen winners and losers picked as to who could and could not work. We've seen large-scale failures by agencies to provide the basic level of supports that they were supposed to provide. And my job has been supporting the district, and I think we've done a really solid job of that. I've spent almost the last 4 months advocating for residents to get unemployment benefits, to get food, to get the security they needed. I have people, even today, Lou, that still have not been paid their unemployment. We are at 15, almost 16 weeks, and they're not getting through. So all I do is spend my time focusing on how we help them, how we help the community, and how we can bring more local control back to addressing these problems.
Can I follow up with that? So the unity stopped when the messaging stopped being about unity. To be quite honest, if we are still falling short with financial support out of Olympia, I completely agree with you that that is still a primary issue. However, messaging from the top, meaning from leadership, needs to be sending a unified message that this is a big deal. This is in fact an emergency because of the number of people hospitalized and dying from this. The unique conditions that you're talking about in Yakima, especially, but also down here in Klickitat County with the agricultural workforce, those are unique conditions that have been going on for a while. We should have stepped in from the get-go to make sure we were managing that better, and we should not have stopped that unified messaging. This should have been something that we are advocating for all of our neighbors the entire time. And the second that you downplay a lethal virus that we still don't know everything about, the second you do that, that's when you open up the door for people to put themselves in
Just
situations.
a point of clarity, are you addressing Chris personally when you say the minute you stop doing that, or are you talking?
I'm talking about leaders in general.
Okay.
I do feel like he particularly has downplayed the virus by some of his choices and actions. So yes, I'm speaking to leaders in general, but I am referring to some of the decisions he's made.
Yeah, I don't believe I've ever downplayed this virus, and there's no doubt we are in a crisis. I think what my opponent's referring to is my lawsuit that I filed personally to sue the governor. And I stand by that lawsuit, and I still think it's as valid today as I did 2 months ago. And the reason being is we have very clear constitutional powers that are given to the governor to handle emergency pandemics, handle emergencies in general. But then we also have a subset of rules and RCWs in place for pandemic response. And it doesn't fall on the governor's office. It actually falls on our local health districts. And the basis of my lawsuit isn't that there's no longer an emergency. We are in a crisis. It's that the response to this pandemic needs to be more locally controlled. If you go into our RCW, specifically 70.26, if you want to have some nice light reading, you'll find that the legislature about 15 years ago delegated emergency planning and response to pandemics to local health districts in cooperation with the Department of Health. So that's where the current response lies. I've never said this wasn't a crisis. I've never downplayed this threat. I've understood that and worked to be a positive response to that threat. But at some point, when there comes questions of what is right and what is legally allowed, I think that going to the courts to determine what constitutional powers are allowed and not allowed, I think that's fair. I mean, we've seen shifting rules and shifting measurements and goalposts, if you will, that have come out of Olympia that are hurting us more than helping us. So I definitely believe that I have been a positive response locally with my community while also advocating for our constitutional rights, which I think is just as important.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, too, this is more, I should have said at the beginning, this is a more casual approach. So I may interrupt with some questions in the middle of something just for clarity or as a follow-up question on the fly, which is fine. So, I'm sorry?
How would you time the response?
I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
I'll be here. We have to do that on the fly.
I'll be here.
I'm more concerned about the big picture scale of time. So, but that's part of the less formal structure of this kind of thing. So let's move on to another question. This one is from a reader, and let me preface this. Some of these readers' questions are, if they came as a letter to the editor, they would be edited. Given the nature of this situation, because we do want to incorporate a voice of the community in this situation, we're not editing the structure of the question, but I will say that some of these questions are worded in a way that is saying, here's what I believe, do you agree with me? And some of the questions would normally require a lot of unpacking because there are multiple facets presented as a single statement, as you'll see shortly. So I just wanted to preface that. So here's a question, which is for both of you. Based on the stated goals and observable evidence of Black Lives Matter, at this time, will you go on record whether or not you personally view this group as a violent communist organization? We'll start with Tracy.
I will go on the record and say that I absolutely do not view this group as a violent communist organization. I believe they have very legitimate grievances, and I believe that they are doing exactly what you were mentioning with speaking to one's rights and advocating for their own rights. I think this is the nationwide equivalent on a larger scale of similar to what the workers in the packing houses were doing. This is a group of people who are disparately affected by chronic disease. They're disparately affected by police violence, and they are taking a stand generally in a non-violent way. I think you could argue that there are other groups in this country who are taking a much more violent stand. So to be quite honest, yes, I think there's been some violence that has happened that's unfortunate and should not be a focus in the future. That being said, there's much more good that's come out of this than bad. I think if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, then we're also, if we're talking about this perceived violence in Black Lives Matter, then we also need to have the conversation about police violence. because the stats just don't line up when you look at which one is actually more significantly impacting people in this country at the moment.
So I think there's two different levels to this question, and obviously I don't have a chance to interact with the person who asked it. So, of course, Black Lives Matter. That's indisputable. I mean, that's, every life is important, is created by God, and is of worth. And we can and should have larger questions about, what our society looks at in terms of police accountability. I have no problem with that. What I think he's asking is the movement, the Black Lives Matter, the political organization, which has stated goals of tearing down our institutions. I mean, that's what they've said, and it's run by people that they've claimed are actual Marxists. They've said that in interviews. So I guess if I'm going by what the founders of BLM have said, then yes, they must be a Marxist organization if that's their stated principles.
All right, and that's a fine point of clarification, because there's a possible distinction between Marxists and communists. He used the word communist.
Okay, well, I tend to find that Marxists and communists are kind of built of the same cloth, I guess, personally. I believe that everyone has the right to peaceably assemble. It's guaranteed in our Constitution, but it's peaceable. Once you cross the line and you resort to violence or rioting, you no longer have that right. That is when your liberty ends, when you're impacting somebody else's liberty and freedom. And that's my belief. So I will support anyone's right to protest, whether it is a lockdown protest or a protest against police brutality. I will say I have yet to meet a single person who supported what that officer did in George Floyd's death. That was a travesty, and that was a moment we all could have come together. And unfortunately, I think a lot of other factors were involved in turning that message from a place where we could be unified to something that became politically divisive.
Did you have a response?
And I actually agree with a lot of what you just said. I think a lot of that was very, very well stated. I think when you're asking a question, though, that what that reader was asking, it implies changing the conversation is what's wrong with the question. Because the real problem that we're dealing with right now is how to be protesting things in a safe, non-violent way that are actual injustices. And this is placing the blame on the people who are trying to speak out against injustice. That question places the blame on people trying to speak out against injustice.
Did you follow up to that, please?
No.
Okay. So, and I know I'm making your stop a lot more.
It has a start-stop.
So, okay. But I'll try to keep it to more, to what we talked about. Moving on to another question here. What's your best option that you see for schools this fall in terms of reopening? And would you engage, this is an editorial board question, would you engage with educators and administrators on this before making a decision?
That's a great question. Absolutely, we should be engaging with our local education officials. It's something I've been doing and will continue to do. The science tells us that kids are one of the least likely affected by this virus. So the first response would be, sure, let's open up the schools. Obviously, the schools are ran by a variety of individuals that may have pre-existing conditions, may have, maybe older, whatever the underlying factors are that may make them more disposed to getting sick from this. So it's not an easy answer. I think that we're going to continue to question this and work through this, especially given now, I mean, we're in the middle of July. It feels like 2020's gone on for about 3 years, right? So who knows what September's going to look like? We don't even know what August is going to look like at this point. So it would be unwise of us to come in and say, we're going to do this because of what we know today. I think there's options for allowing parental choice. So if parents aren't comfortable with their kids not going back in the classroom, providing them the online access to education, we have that option. I also think if we need to look at rearranging how classrooms are done and maybe have, proxy teachers, if they're younger teachers that can come in, those are different ideas I've heard thrown around that I think, are potential. What we got to remember is that, politicians and other people, we're not educators. And so we need to work with educators to figure out what can be most successful. One thing that I think potentially is a good solution is providing some voucher support for families that either can't go back to school because their schools are remaining closed or choose to go another direction so that they can use their tax dollars to get the education that their kids need.
I don't disagree with anything that Chris just said. I think though when we're thinking about opening schools that the primary question is what does the pandemic look like? So yeah, I completely agree with you that we can't forecast a game plan right now, and us not being the educators, it really comes down to those systems to decide what's the safest plan for them. I completely agree with that. That being said, I think we're not going to give our kids the right opportunity. We're not going to optimize their opportunity to get back to school until we get the pandemic under control better. Other countries have been able to do this and have their kids already back in in-person school. That's related both to how they set up the school days and how the pandemic actually looks in their communities. So those two factors are going to have to go into play. I have big concerns about our district. I'm a mom with 3 kids, and my oldest is in the school system. And thinking about some of his friends and my neighbors, we don't have great access here for everybody to have equitable online education is the problem. So when schools are doing their planning, they're kind of stuck there with their hands tied behind them partially. Things like the broadband access here is not equitable throughout our districts. In some places it's completely non-existent. So those pre-existing issues that have been here for a long time are now just bubbling to the surface, and they're impacting everything going on.
Okay. Did you have a response?
Well, I would agree with the internet access. I mean, one of the things that we passed 2 years ago that I was glad to support was rural broadband, and we're going to have to continue to make those investments. I think that one of the other areas that we need more flexibility for school districts to use dollars for hotspots and other things where they see fit. You know, right now we do a lot of, we tie down a lot of funds to specific things, and we don't allow them any flexibility, which I think goes to their detriment. So I think continuing forward, we definitely will have to look at how we allow the flexibility in what they're doing.
Follow-up question on the fly. Do you see kids going back to school in this fall?
I do. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Like Tracy, I'm a parent. I have 4 children. 3 of them are in the school system right now. My wife and I became de facto educators this year, which was a lot of fun. It was challenging, right? But you know, we were in that position fortunately because we have jobs that allow us some flexibility from working at home. Not everybody has that flexibility, and my concern is if we don't open schools, what does that mean for parents who don't have the flexibility or the access that parents like myself and my wife have?
Does that apply then that you think the safety standards would be in place?
Yeah, I think that there obviously before I would ever feel comfortable for schools opening that they would have safety standards in place, similar to the way we have, you know, social distancing, masking, sanitation stuff for workers now.
What's your projection?
I think it's a little bit more cumbersome than are they masking, are they social distancing in the school themselves, because we're already seeing a testing shortage again now with the new spikes in the country. And if we're not able to adequately offer testing and tracing in our communities, then I think it's going to be less feasible to open in-person school. Because when you have in-person school, if one kid gets exposed, if one teacher gets sick, you automatically are having that entire classroom having to go on at least quarantine for a good 14 days. And so if that teacher gets sick, you call in a substitute. What does your backup list of substitutes look like? I mean, the list just goes on and on for the logistics. It's just, and again, I'm not an educator. I'm not working for the school system, but it blows my mind to think about the things that we're having to think about right now. So my prediction would be we're going to do our best to get back in the school system, but I don't think we're anywhere close pandemic management-wise to be able to do it.
Okay. Let's move on to another question. Just for those of you so do you believe that all mandates on public health coming from the governor should always be, this was an editorial question, should always be observed at all times. So,
My kids remind me every day that no one likes mandates. I think they should be a last resort. I think an ideal scenario for the pandemic would start with effective leadership that recognizes an emergency early rather than wishful denial. And I think rather than politicizing, life-saving interventions like masks, like we're seeing from the top down, that we should be, as leaders, inspiring our community to come together and collaborate to protect our neighbors. I think things like the mask mandate right now, with how the pandemic looked, are the only tool that we really have available to get this back under control. We missed our opportunity to not have a mandate months ago. So I do not think that mandates are a good tool in general, no. Do I think that they're needed for certain things right now? The answer to that is yes. And that is because we are in an emergency at the moment.
So that's a complicated answer. I'm gonna try to walk you through it. I mean, we talked a little bit about my position on this earlier. I am a believer in following the law when it is legal. And if there is a legal issue with a mandate or an order, whatever it is, that the appropriate recourse is to go to our third branch of government.
you kind of indicated your answer by your lawsuit.
Yes, I did. But what I would say is this: is that I can be engaged in a lawsuit with the governor while still following the rules. There's nothing that precludes me from saying that. So I wear a mask. I encourage people to wear masks. I believe in social distancing. I think it's effective. I also think that we shouldn't be having super large gatherings, but I'm also not going to stop somebody's right to peaceably assemble, whether it's protesting, the lockdown, or whether it's protesting, something else, whether, BLM, whatever have you. They have constitutional rights to do that, and I respect them both equally, and I wouldn't demean one versus the other. That being said, I think that we have rules in place, we have procedures and authority dedicated in certain places, and that needs to be followed. For our case, we have local health districts that should be in charge of this pandemic response, and I agree with following them. I would argue that even if let's say I had my way and the governor's emergency proclamation order ended, that doesn't mean the pandemic's gone or the crisis is gone. It means that the authority is now with local health districts, which is where I think it needs to be. And for me, living in Yakima County, I have one of the strictest health districts. They actually started the stay-home order before the governor did. They did the mask order before the governor did. So my point is not that I am rallying against any of these orders or mandates for public health. I'm disagreeing with the order and how it's done, and where that where the rules and who has the authority follows. So I respect them from the governor, even though I disagree with how it's being handled, and I would respect them from the health district when they're doing that. So I think if you have an issue with the legality of a mandate, I think your appropriate recourse is the courts.
So just to be clear, your issue is not the science behind it, it's the way the order is given?
I think it's under whose authority it's given. I think that I'm a big believer in local
It
control.
belongs at the local level rather than the federal top.
In one person's office. I mean, you've got to, and I think the masks help. I'm not one of the people that don't, but you have to understand people's frustration when for months they were told they were ineffective, and then the same group of people are telling them they are effective, but then you have an organization like WHO saying, well, if you're asymptomatic, they're not effective. So I think there's a lot of frustration with people, and I don't blame them for being frustrated, because it's like, is it or isn't it helpful? I think it is. I'm going to wear it because it's not going to hurt me to wear it, and I think if it's going to help us solve this problem, I want to be part of the solution.
I mean, what is disheartening to me is that it seems like we are essentially the only country in the world having this debate right now, and it's not even a debate. It's just, are we acknowledging the reality of the situation that's unfolding before us right now, or are we not acknowledging the reality of the situation that's unfolding before us right now? And I would argue that I think your concerns for how things are done are very valid. I agree with you that things should be done at the community level, and I think that the Yakima Health District actually did do a very, very good job. But the problem is with you as a leader choosing to focus on that diverts the messaging. And the messaging is what was so important at the beginning here for people to take this seriously. And the second that you went down that pathway, you undermined what the Yakima Health District was trying to accomplish. Not what Inslee was trying to accomplish, you undermined what the healthcare workers and healthcare district were trying to accomplish. And that is what's heartbreaking to me right now when I look at the numbers coming out of Yakima County.
Okay, thank you. You have a burning, hold on, this is another reader question. Do you have any plans, or do you see a possibility for assisting what the reader calls the gross negligence of mental health during this pandemic?
So there's no doubt we have a mental health crisis in our state and our nation right now.
This is tied specifically to the pandemic.
To the pandemic, okay. For mental health with the pandemic?
That's what she said.
Okay. Well,
And I believe we had a conversation about this in the office earlier. We had the sense that she was talking about the stress from having to follow what's being called safety fatigue, getting tired of all the regulations, the isolation, the sense of trying to deal with being cooped up all the time. I believe that's what she was talking about.
Okay.
That kind of, those kinds of things.
yeah, I think that's a real worry and a real problem that we're starting to see. I mean, drug overdoses are up right now, suicides are up right now, and there's a variety of factors related to the pandemic that I think are causing that, whether it's people who've lost their jobs, lost their businesses, lost their livelihoods. That takes a big toll on people. I mean, we get a lot of our value and our self-worth from the work we do and providing for our families and working in our communities, and those are good things. And when that is forcibly stopped from you, I think that's going to bring up a lot of issues. Fortunately, I will say Washington, prior to the pandemic, we kind of reached a turn in the legislature. It was really bipartisan. It wasn't a Republican versus Democrat thing. We saw the need for better mental health support statewide. We did investments in the University of Washington to help train new psychologists to come out in the field. We provided more support for local community mental health services, both to police and to other organizations. I personally worked on some mental health stuff with PTSD for first responders this past session. So the work, we have a good groundwork going in. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pieces we're going to have to pick up. There's no doubt about that. And
Is this issue even on the radar at legislative levels?
I would say it's probably on the radar in a broader sense than addressing the specific mental health issues. I think it's part of a bigger piece where we're trying to figure out how do we get people back to work, how do we get them the supports they need, those type of things. I think it all relates to the broader mental health picture.
Okay.
And to add on to that, the Washington State Medical Association is advocating for increased mental health resources and development. So that is a piece that's
Oh,
really
they are?
they've been for a long time, but especially with what's going on right now. That's one of their priorities at the moment. I share Chris's concerns with the current mental health issues that have increased with the pandemic. What I am most concerned about is what's going to be essentially blossoming over the months to years following from this. With kids not going to school, with parents not working, there's issues such as substance abuse and domestic violence are increasing under the radar right now. We're going to see the signs of that in the near future, and then the long-term effects from that are things that we're going to be dealing with for years and years. So as a society, it is in our best interest to take this seriously right from the get-go. We've already been in a deficit for mental health management. We're starting to make some headway with removing the stigma of mental health issues, but we still have tons of progress to make, and
Okay, thank you, Rick. We're going to wrap it up and move on, but I want to, and again, there's no way we're going to go through all the questions that have been posed for all of the candidates, for the groups of candidates. So, but I would like to ask you, since, just before we move on, if you have anything that you'd like to kind of present as a wrap-up statement, and we'll do the 3 minutes for each of you. We'll start with Tracy. Well, what would you most like people to leave your thinking about your candidacy? Let's put it that way.
Well, I chose to run for this position. I was driven to file to run for this position because of the health and public health issues going on right now. I feel, however, most connected to my community because of the fact that I have a job where I take care of my neighbors, the fact that I'm a mom and have kids in the school system, and the fact that I have a small business and a small farm here. I'm a rooted member of this district, and I want this to be a wonderful place for us all to work, to live, to raise a family. I think we have the potential to be addressing all of these issues that have now bubbled to the surface. And I feel like I'm in a unique role, just given my current roles, to help identify what those issues are and what should be prioritized in the moment.
So, 3-minute wrap up for a politician. I don't know if that's possible.
Give it your best shot.
I'll do my best. I'm kidding. So first of all, it has been an honor to serve as the 14th district state representative for the last 2 years. This is my first term, so I'm running for my first re-election, and I've gotten to be part of and work on some really amazing things. I'll tell you a couple things I'm proud of is that any one of my districts is welcome through my door. I don't have a political litmus test. I don't even ask what you want to talk about before you come to my office. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you, you are welcome to have those discussions with me. And a lot of times we'll find common ground in things. I'm proud of the work I've done for this district. In my first term, I passed 3 laws that were all because of constituent concerns. One had to do with Discover Pass issues and snow parks. They wanted some clarification and we needed to simplify some laws. So I said, let's get to work, we'll simplify. I had some 911 operators in Jacon talk about some of the PTSD supports they were lacking. So I worked with them to pass a law this year that provides them PTSD support so we can keep them on the lines, handling those calls. I also worked with a resident down in White Salmon who spent years working with the school district trying to get a policy in place so she could adequately support and serve her son's educational needs. When she came to me with that, and she fully admitted that she wasn't sure she was going to be able to work with a Republican, I said, let's get to work on this. And we, in 1 year, with her help and the work in the legislature, we got this passed. So now we're passing model policy for all school districts to be able to use to help address their son's concerns. I work with a variety of people, Republican and Democrat, while still holding firm to my values. Some of my best piece of legislation I co-sponsored in 2019 was with a Democrat from Seattle to help with some reform in substance abuse laws so that peer counselors could work with people in recovery. That's the stuff you don't see in the papers because it's not catchy and it's not, politics and fighting, but it's some of the work I'm proud of. And I'll end with this, and probably one of the most important pieces of legislation that I've done and I'm still working on is supporting our farmers and ranchers here in the 14th and across the state. We have a lot of leased land that is cared for and maintained by generations of Washingtonians, and we've seen those leases being pulled early by the DNR as they go sell them to solar and wind contractors and people who will pay them more money, which is their right to do under current law. But I didn't think that was fair, and so I got DNR to the table. We actually came up with a compensation system that makes the farmer or rancher whole if this is exercised. And unfortunately, the law got derailed at the last minute this session, which is often to happen in a short session. But DNR agreed to put it into practice this year, and they want to work with me to get it signed into law next which means that it will be in statute, so that farmers and ranchers who work the land, if their land is taken from them, are made whole. So I'm proud of my work, and I'm asking for, to be reelected to go back and continue serving the district.
Thank you very much. So we're going to take a brief break to allow you two to stay or go as you choose. And if any of you need a rest break, we'll take a 3-minute break and then come back up. Or if nobody needs it.
I'm just planning on staying.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm going to stay to watch. But now the camera's not on me, so no pressure.
Probably still on your next wide angle.
Not,
are you ready to get us ready to go right now? Okay. So, County Commissioner Position 1, candidates are Jacob Anderson and Joanna Turner. And let's start, we have a question from a reader. We'll start with you, Jacob. How were you qualified to take on the county job when you started, the position you started in? And was that position advertised to the general public?
So my current position with Klickitat County is I'm a project coordinator with natural resources, and I moonlight in economic development. My background is in business marketing with a minor in political science. I am a 5th generation county resident on one side and a 4th generation on the other that comes from the farming and ranching community. I also had already previously spent close to a decade on the board of directors for the Interwood Conservation District. I served on the board of the West Coast Lumber Inspection Bureau, and I also was appointed by Governor Gregoire to the Farmland Preservation Task Force. And with each one of those different positions, I had served on a plethora of other subcommittees within those. And so my background in business marketing, as well as my family has a ranch and a sawmill, and so I was a small business owner on top of it. My background was not in hydrogeology or for schooling, because that was my school and my life growing up. So trying to answer the question, my background in real life was agriculture, natural resources from the day I was born practically. I went to school for business. The hiring panel apparently felt that I was the best candidate for the position. There were multiple candidates.
Was it advertised?
I believe it was advertised. Actually, I take that back. All positions in Klickitat County that I've ever been aware of have to go through the public process. We have a human resources department. So yeah, I'm going to put myself out there.
Okay. What is moonlighting in economic development?
So moonlighting in economic development
Well,
means,
specifically the term moonlighting.
yeah, so what that meant is that wasn't what I was hired for, but I also have a background, dealing with broadband, and my director, Dave McClure, is the head of economic development and natural resources. It's tied together, and so I was brought in to deal with the broadband issue, and then when COVID began, I got pulled into economic development almost exclusively full-time to deal with small businesses, the grants, the programs, designing the marketing materials, and using more of that business background than the natural resources background.
And Joanna, I know that question puts you at a disadvantage in a position, so instead of addressing that, unless there's something there that you really want to address, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your background.
Thank you. So I think I would like to start with just addressing one thing, that in this county, we've had a political machine that has been training its replacements for a long time. And so when we have that machine that's vested in training its replacements and continuing making the same product that it's been making for a long time, it doesn't give us the opportunity to have a diverse perspective at the table or to have diverse voices. You lose a lot of creativity in that process when that happens. And that's something that I can bring to the table. My voice is something that's needed at the table. We've had one perspective in the county commission for a long time, and I want to make the work of the commission more accessible to all residents in this county. Some of the things in my background that give me the experience necessary for this job: I've been self-employed for many years. I've ran many different businesses, one of which was a cooperative buying club in Minnesota. That when I left that position and moved out here, I was able to pass on this cooperative business that I grew from the ground up, and that is still growing, and that's something that I'm very proud of. So bringing consensus to the commission and just getting buy-in from lots of folks that I think have felt alienated from our local political process is super important to me. I am a small business owner. I'm an advocate for domestic violence, sexual assault organization. I have 3 preteens and teenagers, and if that doesn't make me eligible for this position, nothing else does. So, thank you.
Okay. Do you have any response to that? Or is it-
Absolutely. So in terms of creating a political machine, in my positions on all the boards and everything that I've served on, the most important thing that I've seen in this county is that we have to pass on our knowledge to the next generation. And what I have always tried to do is not find just people with a political machine or a political mindset, but I have always tried to bring people from my generation and get them involved so that the generation above them can pass on all of the history, all the culture, and all of the knowledge so that that next generation will be able to become leaders sooner, quicker, and better so that the next generation can be successful. And you see that in political parties, for example. You see that all the time, that the young people aren't interested. People talk about that. You don't, for the most part, the community councils were a bunch of people with white hair sitting together. Well, our community council is mostly people from my generation because I've been pushing to get young people involved because that's how you create the people who are, and it's not political at all because almost all these positions are non-political. It's just getting people involved, and that's because there's nothing more important in your community. We live in a rural area. Volunteerism is what drives this county. Whether it's the fire district, whether it's the school district, it's those positions that matter. And so that's how I think the best way I can respond to that is.
A response to that?
Yeah, just that unless you're actively seeking diverse voices, folks tend to pass on that knowledge to folks that look like them. And so unless you're actively seeking folks that don't look like you, you're encouraging folks that have the same viewpoint as you to come in and then take over and continue on that political issue. And I would like to just point out that there are so many young folks that support my campaign. It's really exciting to see diversity of young folks getting more excited about local politics and really wanting to learn more and get involved.
Okay, thank you. So this is an editorial board question. Does often a perception that the west and east sides of the county reflect the overall discrepancies between the east and west sides of the state? And is so, it's a multiple part question. Is there a political gulf between the 2 sides of the county? If so, is that a concern? And if that is so, what do you do about it? Certainly.
I've always said in Klickitat County that a Republican and a Democrat in Klickitat County will agree on 90% of everything. I see it right here with these 2 conversations that they agree on most everything. And that goes to show, as Chris said, that most things, even in Olympia, most things they agree on. But all we ever see in the news is the things that people disagree on, because that's what sells the papers. Now, I will say, though, that a Republican from Klickitat County and a Republican from King County probably will disagree on more things than a Republican and a Democrat in Klickitat County, because politics comes down to your priorities. We only have so much time, so much money, and how we allocate that. And county commissioners are the ability to allocate those funds at the most local level for the things that we all care about and prioritize here the most.
Yeah, and I would like to follow that up with just building community is so vitally important. If we can't build community and that starts with our neighbors, then what are we doing this job for? And even though there are some differences between Republican and Democrat, I don't think this position should be partisan, because I think that's what it comes down to, is building consensus, building community, showing the people that we care about them. We care about what happens to them, every single one of them.
Do I infer from that you do see a gulf between the sides of the county, or am I mistaken?
I see more of a perceived gulf than an actual gulf. I think that, just like Jake said, people have more in common than they do differences. There are, the people that I talk to all over this county care about the same things. We care about our youth, we care about our community, we care about local jobs, we care about that we can wake up and feel safe. Those are things that we can all agree on. I think when you come to the big political level and what's happening outside of the county, that's when it starts to get hard, that's when it starts to get tricky. I can talk with people all day long, and as long as we're talking local politics and local concerns and what people want for their community, there's a lot of agreement. But when people start talking about things that are happening outside the community on those bigger levels, that's where the disagreement and the frustration really sets in.
Okay. Paul?
Absolutely. I 100% agree that a county commissioner should be nonpartisan. The only time that you should have a partisan race is if you caucus, because that's what you are. You're a Republican, they caucus, and get together at the state and federal level. That is, otherwise, and then you have party whips and you have people that push you to vote a certain way. At the county level, if you're a county commissioner, it's your job to represent everyone. Not just your friends, not just the people who agree with you, not just your political party. Your job is to represent everyone. And if you can't represent everyone, you don't belong on the county commission. And with that being said, Joanna and I have ran and agreed to only run a clean campaign. And we rode up here together. And we talk really well together, and we care about our community, and I'm so happy that she's running. She has a completely different background than me, and I completely respect her background and what she's done with domestic violence. I completely respect Tracy's background. It's amazing sitting next to my son who broke his arm a couple months ago, and she's the one who said it. We're all part of the same community. If we didn't want to work together to make our community better, we definitely wouldn't be putting ourselves through all the stuff that the political campaigns.
Okay. So here's a nuts and bolts question from a reader. Why has high-speed internet not been provided to rural areas, including Trout Lake, and if you were elected, what would you do about it? Tracy?
Tracy?
I'm sorry. You just mentioned Tracy.
No, you're good.
Joanna, sorry.
That is such a point of frustration for so many folks. That is one of the reasons why I started running for county commissioner, because when I bought the house that I'm living in, I was told that there was no internet available for me. Like, there wasn't any available. And when I called my commissioner, he's like, well, yeah, that's the same for all of us, so what's the big deal? I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't okay, this is a problem, this needs to be dealt with. As far as how to handle it, I think there are a lot of creative solutions, which is part of what making the commission accessible to more folks. Things like community internet is something that we've talked a lot about at the Trout Lake Community Council that I sit on, how we can be creative in coming up with solutions, because it hasn't happened so far. I know that the commission's talked a lot about it, but it hasn't happened from the county perspective, from the county level. I'm not quite sure about that. There's been a lot of folks asking and not a lot of answers coming out. So I think there are creative solutions that are out there that we can come up with. And I think it's not acceptable anymore that people don't have access to internet, especially with children having to do long distance schooling. I've got friends who have to drive to the school and sit in the parking lot so that the kids can do their homework. Teachers are mailing out packets of things because students don't have access to the internet. And that's unacceptable in this day and age. We've got so many folks. I work from home a lot. I'm fortunate enough now that I do have good internet, but there's so many people that are working from home or that moved here and said, oh, you won't have a problem getting internet, and that just wasn't true. Folks can't work from home. It's their livelihood. You talk about mental health. When you have people stuck at home, they don't have access to
Or education.
yeah, to connect, there's just so many things. So as far as what to actually do about it, I'm really curious, you know, like Jake said, that was one of the things that he was working on at work. So I'm not sure exactly where that is, and I'll pass it on to you to take it.
That question came from someone in the truck, please.
Yep.
Go ahead.
If I had about 4 hours, I could explain the situation. But I got 2 minutes. So in 2 minutes, what I can say is that broadband has been exceedingly difficult because we're in a rural community, and there's been barriers to entry by large businesses, and as well as the FCC when we released the CAF $2, which was the Universal Service Recovery Fee. CAF, C-A-F, $2.
Oh.
And it's the old Universal Service Recovery Fee. And so CenturyLink got a bunch of money in Klickitat County in order to create broadband and expand it out. But when they got the money, they only had to put DSL, in essence, 10-1. Even though that same month, the FCC upped broadband's definition to 25-3. So we've got millions of dollars that's been invested in Klickitat County in old infrastructure, rather than putting fiber to the houses. And if you talk to a lot of people, we should have been able to take fiber to the house for as much as what CenturyLink was getting paid to put in old DSL lines. It started in 2017-ish. It was a 4-year build out. I'd go to meetings. My big part was trying to push CenturyLink to expand the DSL into areas where people don't have other options. So in Snowden, because there's no cell service, or north up here of town in Pine Forest, and so I was trying to get them to push to build the areas where nobody else could have any other options. So that was that's just one issue, is the barrier to entry. In terms of schooling and everything that we have coming up, there's some really new businesses that are coming out that are really pushing. Remember, COVID is also an opportunity, and my cell phone has better internet ×4 than I have at home using CenturyLink. And as long as you have access to the internet, our schools and our legislature will hopefully come up with funds to ensure that those kids can get hotspots. So all you have to do is, it's just like a cell phone sitting in your house that's using the internet, and it's broadcasting Wi-Fi, so your Chromebook, and you can get online, and it's still going to be successful. Where CenturyLink's 10-1, and then at 5 o'clock at night, you're supposed to have it, but you can't even do your internet on it. And it's faster. And then hopefully next year, Starlink will hit. So we'll have some internet to Starlink. It's what Elon Musk is working on. You see all these little satellites going up, low Earth orbit satellites. That will hopefully help. My big focus, though, has been if it's the fastest, cheapest, easiest ways to expand, to get internet out there, it's through cellular service. The problem is that the cell companies are on build cycles. And so they come in and they only build in a certain area for every 4 years. And if a cell service is trying to upgrade to 5G, and they can deal with 1 million people in town, or they can put one on Diamond Gap and get all of 400 people in Glenwood, where are they going to do? Where are they going to invest their time and effort? So everything that I've been working on has been trying to get them to build more cell service out here and work between emergency management and cell companies to try to create those incentives for them to actually invest in our rural areas.
I will get in touch with you later about a story about that. That sounds like a story. Look at how that came to be with something another time. So this is another reader question, and it's again unedited, so it will convey the sense of the reader's perception that you could address as well as the actual question. And it is, good old boy candidates have been consistently beaten in District 1, but lose at the county level. I'm not quite sure of that. What is the commissioner's responsibility for their district? Joanna, you need to move.
So the problem with that is that when I get elected to be commissioner for District 1, District 1 folks are my constituents, but only in the primary are they the only ones who get to vote for me. So in the general, the whole entire county gets to vote on my district's commissioner. So basically, the whole entire county is my constituents because I've been elected by the whole entire county. The problem with that is that when you have somebody who's elected by District 1, and then the rest of the county kind of knocks that off, then that's not okay, because who's electing that commissioner? District 2 and 3 are electing the commissioner for District 1, so they can't effectively represent the district that they are elected to represent because they haven't been elected by their constituents. So there's a conflict there. It's a huge conflict, and that needs to change. I know that there's been some work done around redistricting and just changing that, but we are a small county. And that's how it works in small counties.
Okay.
I would say that to get to your point, your job as a commissioner is to represent everyone, not just your district. Every decision you make affects the entire county, wherever that money goes. And so that's why at the general election in small counties, under a certain population, the entire county gets to vote. It is the law of the land, and it is the way it works. I'm sure that hopefully we will see that the entire county votes the same way as District 1. But that's up for discussion, but actually that's up really shortly. But in the end, though, it is the way it is. But the perception that it gets back to that perception that the west side has a west side feel and District 2 and District 3 have an east side feel. What we found is that Klickitat County is not Republican, it's not Democrat. Klickitat County is purple. And it has been for a long time. And the entire of Klickitat County, and it's one of the things that I love most about this county, is that we're issues-based voters for the most part. We vote how we feel and what we believe in. And two people, Republicans can vote for Democrats, and it happens all the time. And that's one of the reasons I love this county, is because we're so independent. That's part of our history and culture, that we do what we think is right.
Any response to that?
Just that, yes, we all need to, as a county commissioner, the board of the commission needs to be accessible to all residents of the county. And we need to be able to work with all residents of the county, no matter where we live, no matter what side of the county you're on. We absolutely have to take everyone's concerns. And like I said before, I think the majority of people share those same concerns. Things like broadband, access to mental health care. Those are things that we all want to see improved.
I'm going to hijack my own questions here to bring it up on the fly, because I'm intrigued by what I think I hear coming out of this conversation, which is it suggests a county identity rather than a specific portion of the county identity. And I get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, or take it and run with it, that there's the sense among the people in the county that I'm from this part of the county. And an us-them mentality, and I've only been here 11 years, so I'm a newbie. But what I hear, which is very appealing, is a sense of a county-wide identity that is very inclusive rather than us-them. Is that something that's, am I roughly accurate, or is this something that I'm hearing you represent accurately here from Jacon?
I think we do have a county identity. Actually, I'm willing to say I know we have a county identity because we're all from Klickitat County. If you go back far enough in the history of this county, people have been, I have relations, family relations on both sides of this county. We've pretty well integrated over the last 100 years. That's where you had to go to find your next wife when you were already related to everybody in your half of the county. You know,
Yeah. Is that on the record?
he's agreeing.
That's why I'm here.
But that issue, I mean, we have a true, like, if you go to the historical museums and you look at this county, we're rural, and we've always seen pretty eye to eye. We started out as a really rural agrarian county with natural resources concerns as the main basis and timber concerns. and we work together. And then what we've seen in the last 20 years on the west side, 30 years on the west side, is some transitioning away with high tech, with other things. But I still see that as one county identity. And I think the reason that we have that county identity is because we have the county commissioners, what we're always doing is trying to be on the same team. And people who try to create that dichotomy or that, trying to create that separation, like we just said, county commissioners, it should be nonpartisan, because all that does is create that separation when all we're really trying to do is work for our community.
I think one of the things that ties us all together is our love for the land. I have not lived here that long. I didn't grow up here. I moved here 5 years ago, and I worked on a farm in Trout Lake. And I fell in love with this land. And I love working on this land and just having access to it. And I think that that's something that everybody throughout the county can absolutely agree on. Whether it's people who are ranching or farming, or people who are here because they love the access to hiking or fishing, that is what we love about being here. And so that, I think, is at the foundation of that Klickitat County identity, as you may. And whether it's people that work in the tech industry or it's people that are ranching out here, I think we need each other. We all bring something to the table. We all have a diverse perspective and view that's really important and that is vital to our lives here, to maintaining that way of life that people see and that people love.
Okay. One last question, and then we'll move on to the other position. And this is a nuts and bolts one from a reader. Very nuts and bolts. How should appointments to county advisory boards be made? Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Health Board, Natural Resources Board. A multi-part question. Do you feel that sufficiently diverse points of view are represented on these boards, in particular with regard to the West End? This is somebody obviously from the West End who's focused on your candidate. And she's saying is clearly more liberal and environmentally inclined than the other two districts. Does the West End Commissioner need to represent the district? So again, you're getting the feel for the perspective that she's bringing to the question. So we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I need to clarify the question. So there's two questions there.
Right.
And one is,
Her primary focus is on advisory boards.
Yep, how should those appointments get
Right.
made?
Correct.
And so my answer to that is they should be made by application. People should apply and say, state, what is your interest? What is your experience? What do you bring to the table? They shouldn't just be made by appointment, that's for sure. They need to be applied for. It's something that needs to be put out there, just like a county job. It needs to say, hey, we're looking for somebody to come in and fill this position. And then I think it's the responsibility of the board to actively recruit folks for a position and make sure that there is a diverse perspective on the board. I know for where I work, it's a question of how do you recruit and engage diverse voices so that you make sure that everybody's needs are getting met. And if we're not doing that, it's why I'm running for this job. If we're not doing that, then it's really easy that people's voices get overlooked and left out. We have to actively be recruiting diverse perspectives.
Jim would have the right answer to this in terms of how it's always been done, but how I've understood it is that each commissioner kind of makes an idea of who they want and gets the buy-in from the other commissioners for one of the advisory board positions. I am willing to go on record and say that if I'm your commissioner, I will do it through an application process so that I want the best candidates and I want them to apply, and then I want to hold, some sort of a hearing or some sort of a screening to find out who's going to best do it. I know from fact, because planning is a primary example, that when people aren't heard or they don't feel that they're heard or that their voice is heard, they're going to appeal or they're going to sue. And we have had a very hard time being successful in planning in this county because we have so many appeals. If you had to have buy-in because somebody from your viewpoint is on that board. You may not be in the majority, but your odds of the lawsuit or your odds of the appeal go way down because you've been hurt. You may not get what you want always. We never will in life, I'm sorry. But at least what we can do is make sure that everybody feels like they're at the table. Having been on the community council and gone through multiple years and iterations of planning, the problem is that people just want government to work. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to worry about it. They just want it to work for them. And the only time that they really care is when it's not. And usually, like when you go through the planning process, you do all this outreach, you do everything you can, and then at the 11th hour, when it's like almost time to sign the line, that's when everybody comes to the table. Because now it's fine. It's really difficult. Planning and in the outreach, in the marketing is so difficult. But you have to bring everybody to the table, and it has to happen early. And that's, I mean, being on the planning commission, that's what we're focusing on, is trying to get everything ahead of time so that we can make the best possible recommendation to the county commissioners that we possibly can.
I just want to follow up with that because as a member of the Trout Lake Community Council, I know that there have been times when we have felt like we have not been given enough notice to weigh in on a lot of those types of decisions. And so making that, again, more accessible, giving folks more notice, actively encouraging more time for people to weigh in, soliciting opinions, and building consensus is so vitally important. And I feel like that can be done better.
You get the last word?
We can always be better.
Always. We can agree on that. And lots of other things.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, shall we plow right ahead, or do you maybe you need a break?
All right ahead.
All righty. So, let's start off with questions for specific people first. And so, this one for you, Jim. Oh, so the candidates are Miland Walling, Jim Sizemore, and the incumbent pandemic history. So, Jim, a reader writes, how much money is in the reserve fund?
How much money is in the reserve fund? It's about $6 million.
Okay. How much to respond to that? Unless somebody wants to.
I have a question for that. Has the reserve fund gone up or down in the last 2 years?
Probably down because we spend that down as we accumulate.
So when you use the term "and build up cash reserves," you would be wrong?
No.
So if you spend it down, it would be less.
It's spent down on purpose. We only build that reserve.
But when you put money in, you build it, and when you spend it, it comes down.
And when we spend it, we get a radio project,
Totally, I understand. I'm
dispatch
not
center.
complaining with you sending it. I'm complaining with you saying you built it when it came down.
So what's your point, Dan?
I was just clarifying whether it came down or went up.
And as I understand it, the response is
It does this.
it fluctuates according
It
to.
fluctuates. As we need those funds, we spend it down. The commissioner's job is not to hoard money. We don't build a fund just in perpetuity. We save money for projects that we need to do. The new administration building is one. It'll show in 2020 and in the 19 budget, it started to go down. We had a negative balance, 7.6 million, I believe, Dan, you looked up. That's because we started spending for that new administration building. That was cash, that was not money that was derived from raising taxes to constituents. It's landfill money. We have a unique revenue source in this county.
Go ahead, Dan.
My my point is not to make light of where he spent the money or how he spent the money. It's not that I'm griping that it was spent or not spent. I guess I would say my gripe is I've been attacked by his campaign and called a liar, because I say when he quotes on his website that he's worked to keep the budget balanced and build up cash reserves, the budget hasn't been balanced in 2 years. It's going sky high versus cash revenues, and the reserves are going down. That is a false statement. That's what I said, and I'm being called a liar because his statement, I mean, he just said the reserves are going down. That isn't the false statement.
Well,
And I'm the liar from his,
so, hold on. If I understand it correctly, I just want to clarify the thing said here. You're saying, Jim, this is, as a snapshot of this fluctuating wave, which is a natural phenomenon, it's down at the moment.
It is.
what I'm saying is, he said he's worked to keep the balanced budget balanced and build up cash reserves. And I said that's not a true statement, or not an accurate statement. And looking at the budget graph, you can see where its expenditures are up over the last 2 years, 7.6 and 6.3. I'm just saying it's not an accurate statement, and I'm the one that's the liar for saying it's
all
not
right,
accurate.
let's hold on a second here. I've got a copy of the budget, and we'll come back to that question because that's your
Good enough.
we'll come to, but let me ask this, and then we'll go on. I have a question for Miland, so I don't want to get too far ahead here.
Sorry,
Quickly, let me, since he's saying right now that, Jim, that you call him a liar, is that accurate?
No,
I
his
didn't.
campaign. He did not.
I did not.
Jim did not. Jim did not call me a
I
liar.
misunderstood you. I thought you just
No, I said his campaign.
his campaign.
Yes, sorry.
Is that
No,
true?
if that came off as Jim called me a
I'm
liar,
sorry,
that's
I'm-
not true.
I'm glad I asked the question because I don't want to have any misinformation here. Is that an accurate statement that your campaign called him a liar?
I'm not aware of any campaign committee member calling Mr. Christopher a
Or a
liar.
family
Now,
member.
if it is somebody that supports me from the public, from the citizens, it's free speech.
If you're saying
A
that-
family member that runs your campaign on the internet, maybe?
All right, let's move on. We'll come back to some of these other issues here. So, Miland, this is a, actually, this is for,
Yeah, the feeling Milan would be kind of bored, we would make sure he was tied
Well,
over there.
this was directed at Miland and Jim. It's a question that came up earlier, but since the reader brought it up and wanted it addressed to both of you too, Miland will start with you based, again, the question earlier. Based on the stated goals and observable evidence of Black Lives Matter, at this time, will you go on record whether or not you personally view the group as a violent communist organization?
Well, Black Lives Matter and all lives matter, but I don't have any confirmation on what your others are saying there. I don't have any confirmation on it, so I won't make any comments on that. I just say that all lives matter.
Okay, Jim.
I am the same with
You don't know?
I do not know what, I've never seen that information that Representative Corry alluded to. All lives matter. The board that I sit on, Board of County Commissioners for Klickitat County, we try to leave the national issues at the national level. If there is some racism or any problem, that's going on in the county, we want to know about it. We will just address that specifically here. We don't need to be going nationally, inviting Portland and other, to come here and do the protest for Black Lives Matter. If we have a situation like that here in this county, which we don't, I am not aware of any racism, especially with my law enforcement agencies in this county. We would address that. If we have, issues with, and we do have with mentally challenged people, the local institution is our county jail, and it's absolutely the wrong place for it to be. but I would love to have some discussions, and so would the board. If there's something we can do locally to help that, let's try to do it. I can't affect what the state does, the governor, the state legislature, near as much as I can affect what happens here in Klickitat County. And that's what I would like to concentrate on, is Klickitat County.
Okay, so that question was directly to the two of you, but Dan, if you want to weigh in on that, or we do that opportunity?
Pretty much same as what Chris was over there. All lives matter. I don't know that I would go so far as calling the block that's in charge communist, because I don't research into it. I would say I'm law and order, and I stand for your right for peaceful assembly. I don't care if you're Black Lives Matter, the KKK, I will stand in front and protect you from harm. But the minute you pick up a rock, the minute you light a match, I don't care if you're 15 years old or 85 years old, straight to jail.
All right, Miland,
Yes.
what would your top priority be for this county if you look at the office?
Well, looking for office, I really feel economic development is the top priority. I was a consultant for Klickitat County for 12 years, and that's one of the main goals what I was working on, is for economic development. And one thing that I do, that I feel that I can do a good job, is because I'm working with legislators, and also then legislators and the people from Olympia, Seattle, and the Washington State delegation. I could definitely pass on a good word message from the county. And first again, it's very important to work with the staff, and that's one of the benefits I feel that I can do for Klickitat County. And of course, again, what I've been working on past is the pump storage and data center. And in the year of 18, I put together several of the big meetings and tours for the pump storage project, and where I brought in the UK country council person, and I brought in the different directors from different departments and staff, and we ended up having some of the really good meetings, and they got the support and got the pump storage project going again. With the pump storage going, it also then brought in the data center. And the data center is going to be one of the biggest ones in the United States, and actually the pump storage is going to be one of the biggest ones in the United States. It's going to be a big benefit for the city of Goldendale, and really a big benefit for the county, because they're going to be able to bring in a lot of tax revenue from these two projects. So, but anyway, I can go on, but then there's more.
So your top priority is economic.
Yes, it is, yeah, yes.
So we'll open it up for response from those of you. Jim?
Right now, for me, the most important thing is to try to navigate Klickitat County through this pandemic. It's shut our economy down. We don't see an end in sight right now. We're all hoping. The county has been trying to put out small business grants across the county. They're not very large grants. The most is $5,000. And that won't last very long. For business expenses, we've done 2 rounds of that. One with Working Washington, which was Governor Inslee's program. We got to get those grants. Jacon and David McClure have been part of that selection application sorting committee. The county then, when help me, Jake, it's the CARES Act, but that's the coronavirus something. Anyways, it's the federal program that is reimbursable money for money county has spent outside of their adopted budget for COVID-19 response. And this county, the federal government has told us that we are eligible for $1.233 million. The county commissioners decided to take the $233,000 and we're putting that into our own small business grant program. And we've been, I think, 2 weeks ago, I signed grants for $94,563. This last Tuesday, I did another $65,536. And we're still accepting Army Jack applications and trying, because we haven't capped out for $233,000 yet. But that pandemic is going to be biting us for a couple of years.
You believe that?
I believe that. I believe that.
Okay. Dan?
I tend to agree with that table and that man right there. Economic development is huge. When I asked Mr. Sizemore about that 2 years ago, his statement was that he doesn't want economic development in Goldendale, and Goldendale is fine the way it is. A lot of the cattle ranchers believe the exact same thing. The people don't. Economic development is huge. I do worry about pump storage. I like the idea. 20 to 30 jobs is not really a big job number, and there's two concerns I have with it that they're not addressing by the board. One of them is tax. We don't even know what the governor's going to do with the tax and whether he's going to make them tax exempt. That could become a problem. Right now, they have pump storage set to be in tax district 37, which sneaks up and only incorporates the little town of Goldendale. You could have some big disparities in property tax values for that little district 37, or tax district 37 in the neighboring districts. There's a issue, their budget person thinks the numbers coming in from that will allow them to spend more money are here, and when you actually talk to the assessor, it's down here. There needs to be some communication. They need to get the budget guy with the assessor guy, figure out, they're planning for billions of dollars of spending, and they don't really know because their two people aren't on the same page. They're not on the same page with the governor to find out what is the tax base going to be for this thing. Are the people going to eat it in the end? So I have a couple of concerns that aren't being addressed. Economic development, I'd like to see more than pump storage and 30 jobs. I'd like to see stuff right here for our people in our town. And number two thing is serving and protecting our youth. We have 75 to 80% of the at-risk kids in the county, right here in our town. The only community-funded youth center is in White Sand. I told Mr. Sizemore about that a year and a half ago. Nothing's done. We have to start serving our youth, and we have to start serving them right here, right now.
So I'll give you the opportunity, Jim. These made claims that you have characterized, said something to him, like that Goldendale's fine the way it is.
Well, I'm not going to dispute any of the quotes that Mr. Christopher
Well, my concern
has
is,
done. But I would just say that I have been a huge supporter of pump storage, of the solar projects, and the vineyard expansion and winery expansion in the county. And most all of that is occurring in District 3, our district. That economic activity will bleed over into Goldendale. Goldendale is its own jurisdiction within the city limits. They have a city council and a mayor. And if they have a project they want to do, come to the county. And they have in the past, they've come and asked for funds for the airport here outside of
How'd that go?
town. I indicated to the city council and the mayor that when we built that new administration building, the sales tax revenue that the city will see is going to equal what they were going to ask the county for.
You're right, but they can't spend it on that because they have to buy a new ladder truck so they can fight the fire in a 3-story building.
I'm sorry, but they had a ladder truck before, and they got rid of the ladder truck. This new building
Just telling
is
you what
no
they're
taller.
spending the money on.
The new building is no taller than any other old building in Goldendale. The only big difference is going to be the new building is going to be up to fire code and probably will be the last building you have to worry about catching on fire. I would worry about our other old buildings that are that same height.
The Goldendale Fire Chief has a problem, and he's not getting his concerns addressed by the county commissioners.
So hold on. So we're going to change the wrap-up stage of this a little bit on the fly because we have 3 candidates. I want to be sure Miland gets plenty of time to get his side, his views represented here too before we get off on a runaway train. Having said that, I also know that there is kind of a runaway train here because we want to take some time to address the fact that again, we sent out a 3-page campaign letter. Not everybody in the county got, a great number of people did. And we spent the last week fact-checking the claims made in that letter, so I want to come back to that. And because of the nature of the race, and especially because of the voluminous nature and detailed nature of the statements you made in the campaign letter, we will come back to that. But I want to be sure that we don't get Miland lost in the mix here. So Miland, let's come back to you.
Okay.
And this is a reader question. Will you support Sheriff Saunder and his deputies as they work to protect the citizens of Klickitat County from criminals, or do you intend to reduce the sheriff's office budget and reimagine law enforcement?
No, I don't support defunding sheriff or police departments. The sheriff has a job to do, and he has his own department, and again, I would never support defunding police and sheriff's departments.
Okay. And then I'm going to go right on with Miland again, because
Sure.
we'll spend some more time on some of these other things. What's your stand on the Second Amendment?
Well, I realize that people have their rights for carrying guns or having guns, I haven't followed up that route closely, but I definitely understand where the people of Klickitat County are coming from. One thing, it's not going to stop here. I mean, we're going to have more be coming from the state and also from the national level. And the only thing that I can do on my part is the people I know over on the west side, I can at least give a message. I don't know if they'll listen that much, but at least the people that know me, I can give a message to where Klickitat County is coming from on the Second Amendment.
Okay, so where do you stand on that?
I see. Well, yeah, they have the rights, if I understand the question, they have the rights to have bear arms. I guess that's...
Well, I suspect that, and not to put words in the reader's mouth, but they're probably concerned about things like I-1639, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that push was made over on the west side, obviously. And, that's, I just, like I previously said, 1639, if it goes to court, Supreme Court, and whatever decision is made, after that, then there are probably going to be more bills coming from the state and even from the national level. I could probably ask Chris about that.
Okay, so I'm still trying to flush out a definitive stand on it. Do you support 1639 for example?
Well, no, that was forced to take, in fact, I don't remember the details of 1639. I know it's very, very...
Can somebody jump in and give them a quick synopsis?
I guess I can. 1639 was an initiative 2 years ago that provided additional restrictions on gun ownership for those under the age of 21, as well as additional background check requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway.
Is that something you support?
Yeah,
I don't mean to pin you to something that you haven't spent a lot of time on,
Yeah.
so don't let me force you into the position.
Okay. Well, I just say that, you know, I understand where they're coming from, and like I said again, there's gonna be more issue that's coming down the road.
Okay. Okay. So, what's your sense about, this is another reader question. What would be your attitude personally and as a commissioner on allowing the accommodation to steal the Lonely Valley? Are you willing to protect your constituents' rights and how?
I would definitely work on that. Being a county commissioner, I would listen to both sides, you know, the acclamation, definitely from the Klickitat County, and I would hear and go from there, but I would definitely be looking after Klickitat County. But I want to hear both sides, or, you know, as a county commissioner. That's the way I look at it.
Okay. Let's come back to, again, I want to put something to, so as I mentioned, we've been looking at the campaign letter you sent out, 3 pages, with a lot of statements. So as I mentioned, we're completing a very comprehensive fact checking on the claims, but we'll bring out a couple of points that were particularly striking to us. So one of them, you claim to state in your, let me back up a moment too here. I appreciate the fact that you don't want to be responding to specific name calling, that kind of thing. I appreciate that. So we're not trying to go there. What I do want to get a sense of is how you, is whether or not you want to correct a misimpression that has been potentially.
I would like the opportunity to
Correct.
try.
So that's where we're going to go here. And Dan, I want you to understand,
Yep.
I'm not saying anything that's in a challenging way. We're just trying to find out the information accurately. So you state in your campaign letter that Commissioner Sizemore, quote, has used his office to use eminent domain to take private property from landowners, and in doing so, he is making the fields Grange rich, unquote. So our research indicates the county has not taken any property for eminent domain in the last 14 years. Are we missing something? What's your substantial?
Well, you're absolutely missing something.
What is that substantiation?
You just gotta go back about 2 months. White salmon.
Specifics.
Jim, any ideas? 2 months, white salmon? I hate to name names, I really don't want to, and you shouldn't have to, so don't name them if you don't want to.
But the question isn't the claim that there was eminent domain.
Yes,
you know.
the exact quote from the letter, exact quote is, Commissioner Sizemore has used his office to use the eminent domain to take private property from landowners, and in doing so, he is making a few of his friends rich, unquote.
Let's put it this way, I'm not gonna throw names out there unless it really needs to get there, because I prefer it doesn't get there.
Well,
But,
your statement,
let's,
your statement is that
I get it.
he did use eminent domain to make his.
We're talking about a road, we're talking about road widening, we're talking about land at the back side of the road that was bought for pennies in the dollar because it's undevelopable, because the county road isn't wide enough to develop it. So, this land's purchased, you go to the commissioners, you get them to claim eminent domain on the houses that will not give up their land to this guy to widen the road. They eminent domain the road, take it from the private property owners, widen the road, land developer at the back now has property that's worth way more than he paid for it. That's what I'm talking about.
Good.
As far as I know, eminent domain is that's a legal action. We have not done that.
Do you forcibly take property
But-
from a
Hold
property
it, hold
owner?
it, hold it. You used the term eminent domain, which is a very specific term. If you didn't mean that, you might have chosen other words, so let's.
It was used in the testimony of that situation, so that's where
You
it's.
used the term eminent domain.
I may have said eminent domain, you know, is maybe what the county will have to consider. That road is Courtney Road that you're talking about.
I wasn't gonna name things.
That road is the only access in and out of a
So is it
community
easement?
area.
Is it easement?
Pardon me?
Is it an easement?
And we're trying to widen it and straighten out some of the corners so that when we have a fire up there, people can safely evacuate. It's a public safety issue. we were having trouble with easements, acquiring easements to do the widening of the road. I said, if at the end of the day, we can't get it done, those people have got to be able to get out of there.
Did a landowner
We never
come to you?
exercise eminent domain. The
I will email
statement
the
is
information
false.
to you, Lou.
The statement is false.
I will email the information to you.
Let him finish and then I'll give you a chance.
You know, eminent domain is legal action, it takes court proceedings and a judge decides. And that was never done.
And that's what we discovered, is that there was no legal action in the
No.
eminent domain in the last 14
No.
years. So you may have chosen a long term, but
There you go.
it's in.
I will, if that is the correct terminology, I will fully admit I used the wrong term.
Okay,
My point of legal or eminent domain was forcibly taking land from a private property owner to widen the road, to make the developer at the back of the road, who happens to, you'll find out, rich, has nothing to do with widening and coordinating and public safety. That landowner came before the board because he could not get permission from the landowners to give up part of their property to widen the road for his housing development. That's where I was using the term eminent domain.
is that an accurate
It's,
characterization?
I don't recall the exact on that conversation,
2 months
but
ago.
that is up to, on that situation, that's going to be up to the developer to get the required easements.
The county
To
did it.
do
It was a
his
public hearing.
Okay, so let me address another point. These are the two most striking ones that came up to us in looking over the letter. You claim that the county, and this goes back to something that we talked about earlier, you claim that the county budget is not balanced, but we have testimony from the previous budget director and from the budget that I'm looking at. And again, I'm certainly no professional at reading budgets. That the county budget's been fiscally sound or responsible every year. The revenues have matched the operating expenses. Most often the county has come in under budget. And again, I'm correcting that if this sounds wrong. It can appear that expenditures are outstripping revenue because some expenditures are drawing on earlier revenue. Do you stand by your statement about the budget not being balanced?
Yeah.
And how do you base that? How do you substantiate?
I base that on all the public information that's provided by the county, whether you look at their budget online, whether you look at the graphs
I'm
of
looking
the
at the
budget
detail.
that they show on the wall in the county thing. And I'm also calling that based off the budget meetings that I'm in all of. When I purposely asked the budget director, did we balance our budget this year? He turned around and said, no. Second year in a row, and he told them, you can't do this next year. I just go by what I hear from budget directors and what I see in graphs.
Well, we have a quote from the budget director saying that the budget has been balanced on
The
record.
Past or the current?
Past. And I would ask you to provide a substantiation in the actual figures rather than anecdotally. And as you look that over, let me give Jim a chance to respond to that.
Well, this is the county's budget.
I don't have access to that.
It's not an easy read.
I'm waiting for the movie.
And the way that Glenn, who was our fiscal manager for the county, he retired at the end of May, and we're still looking for a replacement. He does not put any of the fund balance, which is cash, from any of the funds into the budget that we worked through to adopt in December. So the revenues that are reflected in the 2020 budget are what was projected from all the departments would come in through that year. The same with the expenditures.
It's getting easy.
What Glenn does to then balance it out is, and we're always about 5 months behind. from the actual budget year, because the auditor does not file the final report to send to the state auditor's office till the end of May the following year. Glenn has always, it's a different way of doing it, but Glenn always waits till that final report is filed, because nobody can change in their department any of their expenditures or the revenue. And he doesn't have to go through, work out the budget, and then have somebody come in and say, we gotta do this. So he waits till it's finalized. And by then, we've seen the whole year, we've seen that whole year transpire, because it's the year previous, and we see how all the revenues came in. And historically, for most years, unless we plan on spending down some cumulative reserve, we come out positive with more revenue than we did expenditures. And it shows on the 10-year charts that he gave you.
Except
and
for the
it
last
shows
2 years.
What's your point, Dan?
I'm not arguing with most of that, except for the last 2 years. He already said the reserves are down. The only way that reserves can be down is if you spend them. Which means you've spent more than you earned and had to use some of your savings. It's simple.
And that's what I do at home.
That's fine. Then
That's
the
why I
balance-
have a
That's
savings
fine.
account.
Then your budget didn't balance if you had to get into your savings account.
The county is in a very strong position.
So,
I'm not complaining that it isn't.
am I mistaken in assuming that budget's balanced or it's not in the books at the end? I mean,
Hey,
sure, it's not as simple as opening a QuickBooks and looking at the bottom line.
no,
But it's either balanced or it's not. And in
Wait,
terms of the
but
actual-
Without
our
using the
fiscal
savings account.
manager tracks the expenditures and the revenues throughout the year. Like for 2020, the books won't be finalized till the end of May 2021. And that's when we get our final report on how we did.
It won't be
in
final until you
2020.
audit it, but.
But we track it, we know if we're going to end up short or if we're going to end up long, because it's tracked monthly for the expenditures.
My point is, my term is accurate, because a balanced budget is if you bring in $10 and you spend $10, that's a balanced budget. If you bring in $10 and spend 15 and have to go to your bank and take 5 out, that is not a balanced budget. It's, I don't know how we have to get so technical on
And
it.
you're saying that there are parallels to what you just described occurring on the county level?
When you have to get into your reserves, which he's already stated are down the last 2 years, and you see the budget graphs that are higher, and you see the revenue line and the expenditure line, see, here's his line from when he took office. Just kind of up, 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 but they're close to even, I'll give him that. But the last 2 years, revenue down, expenses up. When you do that, you have to take the money out of your savings account, you take the money out of a rainy day
That's
fund.
why you saved it.
I didn't say that there was a problem, I just said you haven't balanced the budget.
So I'm not seeing the same figures on the budget diagram that I've got, but we should.
We'll cross-match, these
We'll
are off the website, it's what's posted on the website, half of their
So-
county website has a 440 code.
Is it accurate to say that if it comes out of reserves, you are no longer with a balanced budget?
Pardon me.
Is it accurate to say, as Dan is saying, that if you have to pull something out of reserves, it's no longer a balanced budget?
Well, that's not how we've termed it. I would disagree.
Okay.
I would disagree.
All right. So we're closing in on our the last bit of time, and I want to give mine another shot.
Come on, Miland.
Miland's probably happy to know.
But I do want to bring up one more reader question, because, and actually there've been quite a few. And once again, I'm not trying to be contentious here or paint anybody with any brush. I'm just describing what's been coming in. So we have a number of comments that came in that suggest that the tone of your campaign, Dan, is extremely contentious, very, one person used the term mean-spirited. So the question for, and you're welcome to respond to that in just a moment. So my question, the reader's question to Jim is, how do you feel, this is their wording, how do you feel about having a character assassination campaign run against you in the public record?
Well, I'm the incumbent, so my defense on me as 7.5 years as a county commissioner is my record. That can't be changed. Okay, how I vote is on record for every decision that was made. This county is fiscally strong and will recover from the recession. We're in a recession. We can't kind of forget about that because the pandemic has got it pretty well hidden right now. But when we come out of the pandemic, we are going to be able to realize just how bad the recession is for a while. So I didn't expect the level or the magnitude of the attacks on me. But what really surprised me is why the attacks ended up encompassing my colleagues, because one commissioner can't decide anything. And I can only remember one time when there was not a unanimous vote, and I was the dissenting vote. That's why I probably can remember it, and that was way back when I first took office. We talk, we discuss, and yeah, some of the quotes that Dan had put in his letter are me expressing frustration with certain situations where we can't figure out how to correct something. But disparaging, denigrating, and maligning my family and my friends, and especially the good, hard-working people in Klickitat County with his comments, I think that's just above and beyond. I feel really bad for Klickitat County having witnessed this campaign.
Dan, your response?
Quickly, it was not a character assassination. I never attacked his character. Jim is a good man. He knows I think he's a good man. We differ on our policy decisions. All that letter was quoting things he said about different policy decisions. You call that a smear all you want. It's not a totally
I think we're
factual.
talking about the tone of the letter more than anything else.
I disagree. I'm just telling you where he stands on the issues, and it's up to you to decide whether you agree with his quote or my quote.
All right. Miland?
Yes. Yes, anytime.
And this is, and I'll reiterate again that this is an unusual campaign in a lot of respects, so I felt we needed the time. And again, it's an editorial board decision. Since we're a regular candidate, tonight might have gone in a different direction, but I'm taking the way it is appropriate for the situation. So, and again, Mike, to be fair to you, I want to give you the, I wanted to wrap up in about 2 hours, we're close to that now. I want to give you the opportunity to take, say, 4 to 5 minutes to wrap up why you're here and why you're doing it.
Okay, all right, well, thank you, Lou. Well, first of all, Dan made a comment about the tax and the pump storage. I think I will look into that. That's a very good question. I'll look into that because I always thought unless it was a utility company that the county would still be able to have a tax base on that. I'm going to change the subject a little bit and go back to when the landfill was first starting. And I was very involved with that. And I was, at that time, as Rebanco, they got a hold of me, and they said, Miland, you know everyone up there in Seattle, the Seattle City Council, and so they asked me to come up there, and I did a lot of lobbying for Rebanco to get the the landfill going. Now, in the conversations, the many meetings I attended, I don't know if they're ever in writing, but the money supposedly was going to be for, yes, some reserves and also for economic development. That's the way I understood the revenue from the landfill. But anyway, that I don't think it was written down in the conversation that was said, you know. But anyway, I just want to, one comment I'd like to make, I am on the Goldendale City Council, and I still would like to have the commissioners, as a commissioner, I would support the city of Goldendale by investing more money for different projects that they're working on now. Now, I know they're working on, they've invested some money, but I really think they could do more. Because the revenue, again, I'm going by my past knowledge of what the information I had from the pump storage, the revenue is going to be coming in big time in a few more years. That would be starting with the
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you, but just while you're on that topic, Dan made an allusion to about 30 jobs. Is that true? You're saying what the jobs?
Well, I've heard different stories. I mean, I heard up to 100. Of course, again, that's permanent jobs. Of course, again, there will be 3,000 jobs, and the PUD did a study.
The initial jobs.
Yeah, and the building of the construction of the project, and it would be 1,500 a time working. Now, we don't know yet just where these people, these workers would come from. Some will be here in Goldendale. That's one thing that the city council and also the commissioners are going to have to say, okay, how are we going to deal with this? And I think it's a very positive. Of course, a lot of them are going to be commuting and whatever, you know. So I just feel, you know, that we can, it's going to be a big benefit for the city and the town.
And you have long-time relationships with a lot of state and congressional figures, do you not?
Yes, I do. Yes, right. I mean, I've known all the governors, and when I say all the governors, unfortunately some have passed away, but they've been very supportive of me and helped me out in projects that I've worked on here in Klickitat County. And, you know, also the congressional delegation. I personally know them. I've known them for a long time. I keep up with the staff members, and again, that's very important to keep up with staff members. And again, that's why, being a county commissioner, I feel that I can really play a good voice for Klickitat County. And but anyway, also I've been doing a lot for the hospitals, Skyline Hospital and KBH Hospital. And again, I support the sheriff's officers and police officers and the volunteer firemen that we have here in the county. One thing I would like to see is, and of course again, I support the veterans of Klickitat County. But one thing I want to say is I would like to bring back the EDA grants. That's the economic development grants where each community can apply for, it used to be $350,000, but the EDA board would make that decision to board how much they would want to put in. But it's an opportunity for the fire departments to, and also the Grange halls and the rodeo grounds, playground equipment and whatever. I mean, it was 10 years ago, but this saved several fire departments of these EDA grants. And I really want to bring this back. I don't want to wait a couple years or whatever before we start talking about it. I would like to start talking about it now. And in fact, I even hope this fall in the commissioner's budget that would be brought up. And you know, anyway, one other thing I would like to say as a commissioner, I would set up a meeting once a week and anybody can make an appointment or come in and talk to me. It could be one person or it could be a group of people and tell me what concern they have for the county. And I guess really the bottom line, you know, I'm here to work for the people of Klickitat County. Now, one quick thing, I just got another 30 seconds. When you talked about brought up the nonpartisan, that was brought up by the legislature years ago, and I remember seeing it, because I often thought that really a lot of these races should be nonpartisan. But the bill, all of a sudden, I didn't see the bill anymore, and I'm just guessing that the bigger counties killed the bill. But I really thought that was going to be a good bill that I definitely would have supported, but it didn't last very long.
To make it a nonpartisan position.
Yes, right, yes, that's what, excuse me, that's what I meant, yes. And again, you know, it just, we got a lot of things going for, that's one of the reasons I'm running. We got a lot of things going for our county, and again, I support the communities of the Klickitat County, and I want to continue that. So anyway, that's what I appreciate for hearing my story.
Thank you. All right, that's our time. Thank you all for being here. It's very appreciated. I'd love to hear some feedback from you. I will follow up on all of you for